bizarre things out of desperation. But these morons pulled off the weirdest things to have ever happened in the history of the show, and this first guy will make your jaw drop. I've been covering a ton of oddballs who featured on the show over the last couple of weeks, but the ones I'll be talking about today were ready to go to any length to get what they want. Some of them are so crazy that it seems kind of unreal. Let's start with this weirdo who was caught in the Fairfax County sting back in the day when the team was just setting up their base, which means the cops were still not part of the ongoing investigation, and the burden of dealing with the bunch of losers was entirely on the production house. And let me tell you, it's not an easy job to pin down mudheads in the absence of law enforcement. However, the production team was determined, and this determination was met with an equal and opposite force named John Michael Kennelly. Of course, every man who is caught on the show is a specimen of his own kind, but this one was different. Kennelly left quite the impression on everybody with his odd behavior and even weirder activities. A lot of them came and a lot more left, but Kennelly is someone who will forever be remembered for doing the weirdest thing to have ever been recorded in the history of the show. Although Kennelly went by the screen name Special Guy 29, there was nothing really special about him. After showing hell of a lot of interest in the boy he had gotten in touch with online, Kennelly decided to take the next step. He expressed his deep desire to become a boyfriend and explicitly talked about the things he would like to do with the boy. Kennelly then continued the conversation and claimed that he was a 29-year-old prep school teacher who taught kids from the 11th grade. It was not until much later that Kennelly's real age surfaced. This jerk was actually 43 at the time of the sting and wasn't even employed. It's pretty clear that this moron was ready to lie at the blink of an eye to get what he wanted. But since he came across as a pretty no-nonsense kind of guy, the team decided to play along with his stupidity. However, nobody expected him to take a passing joke seriously. Just how far would this man go to try and date a boy who he shouldn't even be talking to? Trust me, the entire team's jaws hit the floor when they saw this. Ooh la la, that's more like a treat to sore eyes. Jokes aside, I think of all the weirdos to have ever been featured on the show, none of them were as devoted as this guy. I mean, this guy was ready to go to any lengths to please his partner. People talk about shedding the ego before you start a relationship, but this one decided to shed his clothes. Now, before you start laughing, let me remind you, this must be quite a significant move from his side. Why else would he do it otherwise? And to think of it, Kennelly had barely spoken to the boy for about an hour, and he already decided to make him his boyfriend. This guy is goals, man. Just look at the level of commitment. It's just oozing out of his bare skin and dumb face. And damn, does this guy have any restraint at all? At the time, the Watchdog organization did not have much experience, as it was only their second sting, and they had no idea how things would play out in real life. Had they known, I don't think they would have asked the loser to strip before entering the house. Yeah, they actually asked him to. In fact, everyone on board thought Kennelly was joking when he mentioned that he did not wear inners in order for him to strip. Coming from a 43-year-old, this statement is screaming out that this moron had some major malfunction inside his head. As Kennelly arrived on the scene, he was seen carrying a 12-pack along with him. The man then proceeds to enter the house via the garage, and this is where he did something you wouldn't believe.
At one point, the decoy said something about, what would be really hot.
Kennelly was finally down to wearing nothing but socks. He then walks right in, and nope, he did not even need any kind of invitation before he barged right in and took his place on the stool. I have no idea what was running through his head, but those few milliseconds of silence that passed between Chris and Kennelly in the room alone is epic. And no matter how many times I replay this next clip, it never fails to get me.
Could you explain yourself?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead and cover up.
Certainly. I'm sorry.
What's going on here?
This must be one of the most unforgettable "what's going on here" moments from the show. Chris could barely look at him with a straight face. I'm surprised how he maintained his composure, because this was a true test of self-control. For this loser who came to meet a boy and have some fun, things ended up being disgustingly embarrassing. I mean, if getting caught red-handed was not enough, imagine what it's like to get caught like this. While Chris started firing questions like he normally would, Kennelly was still trying to come to terms with what had just happened. While the only few words that left his mouth were "I'm sorry," Kennelly's mind was rushing through all the possibilities of who the towering man was. Was it the boy's father? Or maybe this was the boy himself? I mean, when Kennelly could lie about his age, anyone could, right? So what's the safest thing to do when you're stuck in such a dire situation?
Your son IM'd me. And he told me to come on over.
He IM'd you.
Yes.
Damn right! Just go ahead and blame the person who isn't around. Kennelly assumed that should be a good enough excuse to get himself out of the sticky situation. But was it? Once the cameras popped up, Kennelly decided to stay mum. There was no point talking back, and I'm glad he realized that. When it was finally time to leave, Chris had to remind him of something really important. I don't think any other idiot has been through this level of humiliation on this show. There was no need for the cops in this case. What happened back in the Sting House should be a good enough lesson to never repeat such an offense again. But this is where things get weirder. Literally less than 24 hours later, Kennelly was caught in the same bait once again. At this point, I don't know whether I should feel bad for him or laugh my arse off. As for Chris, he was in disbelief.
We've been through this before. What are you doing?
This time around, Kennelly was charged with a 2-year suspended prison sentence, 3 years of probation, and a lifetime registration as a offender. Phew, that must have served him right. I don't think he's ever going to attempt something like this again, but that's how normal people react. And there was nothing normal about this guy. Kennelly was once again the prime suspect in a case where he apparently flashed 2 young girls in public and ran into the wood. Meet Hamp. Yes, this is the same guy who sparked off a wide range of memes on the net. The man was so creepy that he left a disturbing legacy behind him. So Hamp was the screen name of a 53-year-old retired truck driver from Jacksonville, Florida. There is no doubt that this pedo raised the bar of spookiness like never before. The man we're talking about is James Wiles, and he was en route to the Flagler Beach House with some really evil intentions. One thing I have to say, evil or not, Wiles was smart. Just take a look at the screen name he went by. He could easily catch an underage kid's attention. It didn't sound spooky or intimidating like most other predators. If anything, it was really catchy. I mean, Hamp sounds like a silly guy on the other side. But behind all of it was a man whose intentions were anything but funny, and the decoy, who was claimed to be 13 years old, found out about his dirty and dark truth pretty early in their chat. Once Claire, who hailed from Daytona Beach, contacted Wiles, he did not waste any time to get down to business. He was outright and honest about his intentions right from the beginning. And what's more, he gave his dirty intentions the name of love. What better way to lead a child into the wrong path than play with their fickle emotions? And this man was no rookie to this atrocious activity. Wiles was so desperate that he got straight to the point. He skipped all of the introductions and everything else, and directly told Claire that he wanted to her. But of course, he didn't force her into anything, since he wanted it to be her decision in the end. Quite the clever play, don't you think? Once he sensed that Claire was in on his game, he went on to detail every bit of what he wanted to do with her, and the way he described it is sure to turn your stomach. The decoy Claire played along with Wiles, since it was crucial that the team get him over to the Sting House. When Wiles said that he wanted to flick his tongue inside of her, Claire gave him assurance by saying that she wouldn't mind doing anything he asked, as long as he was gentle. Surely the team was no stranger to this awful psychological game going back and forth. Wiles also hadn't noticed anything suspicious in the chats and continued, unaware that he had been caught in the trap. Wiles had many more fantasies that he mentioned to Claire, and one of them was that when the two meet, he'd like it if Claire was in her Oh wait, not just any underwear, but a pink one to be exact. Claire responded and told Wiles that she didn't mind any of that, but she also had a request of her own. She asked Wiles whether he could grab her a couple of M&Ms on the way, and this statement sealed the deal. Wiles had arrived at the house where a 19-year-old actress had been hired by Dateline NBC to play the role of Claire. This man could hardly walk straight. I'm not sure what he was ailing from physically, but when it comes to his head, this man was definitely sick. Once inside, Claire inquired if he got what she had asked for, and yep, he had kept his side of the deal. And now it was time for Claire to keep hers. And so, under the pretense of changing her clothes, Claire left the room. In split seconds, Wiles began preparing for what was to follow. He was in such a hurry that almost immediately he started to play around with his man tool, and that's exactly when Chris Hansen made an entry. But Wiles was unfazed.
Out there.
Yeah,
What are you doing here, Ted?
I'm coming to see her.
When Hansen asked him if he knew what the age of the girl was, Wiles claimed that he did not intend to have 13-year-old girl, but was only here for a visit. When Hansen tried to read out the chat logs, the pervert blatantly jumped in to make his point, and what he said next will prove to you that he was way more twisted than you would have ever thought. Well, you have to see this to believe it.
We will be making love all the time I'm there. Okay, cool. With my tongue up your blank.
Gosh, this guy was really crazy. Who speaks like that? But Hansen was no fool to fall for his lies. Hansen decides to cut the crap and reveal his true identity, but Wiles continued to remain calm and composed. It was as if he already knew that he wouldn't get into much trouble. He, however, insisted that all he was looking for was friendship. Yeah, right. Just as he was about to leave, the inevitable happened.
It's police who are gonna do the arresting.
Turn around.
Once at the police headquarters, Wiles was questioned about his vile intentions, but he repeatedly refused to give in. Despite being charged on 4 counts, the police end up making a grave mistake. They let him go! Although Wiles was conditionally released, this was all that he needed to make a run. He was on the run for a while before getting arrested. However, this too lasted only a brief time. So did he escape again? Well, this time, he died! James Wild died in his cell even before he could get convicted. Sure, there's no greater escape than death, but a source revealed that his last few days were extremely painful. In this case, do you think death came as a punishment or maybe a means of escape? What happened in this next episode was even crazier.
I gotta do something I can't do that. Oh my God.
For this entry, let's head over to the Bowling Green, Kentucky Sting, where the team had landed a new catch named Lorne Armstrong. After moving from Cambridge, Maine to Nashville, Tennessee, right off the bat, Armstrong got busy. While most people would take time to familiarize themselves with a new neighborhood and settle down, Armstrong was into something else. The first thing he wanted to do was to reach out to all the fresh faces that he could meet and perhaps even date someday. The only problem being the age factor of his target group. The thing that sets Armstrong apart from the other men on this list is that Armstrong was very good at convincing people. This was a very dangerous skill, since Armstrong could talk anyone into anything. He was so manipulative that when he started his conversation with a girl who went by the screen name of Kayla Princess 94 and almost immediately started posing as the ideal guardian savior. He portrayed himself to be a man whom she could trust, and even told her that if she didn't have any friends, he was glad to be one. He also backed up the statement by saying that he himself had 2 nieces whom he was very fond of, and who doesn't like to be pampered. Armstrong went to great lengths to make sure that the girl felt comfortable with everything. He started off by discussing Kayla's relationships and educating her on the dangers of weird men online. This is quite hypocritical since Armstrong didn't consider himself as one. Just how narcissistic was this guy? Armstrong was surprised when he heard that the girl had a boyfriend, but the 2 of them hadn't done anything yet. Soon, Armstrong was head over heels for Kayla and specifically told her that he was in love with her innocence. I guess he was finally coming to the point. Armstrong continued to chat with Kayla and urged her to experiment with herself. Now this might sound like a lot, but just 2 hours into the conversation, Armstrong was desperately trying to get closer to the real deal. For the next 2 months, Armstrong played it slow and steady, taking his time to gain the girl's confidence. And finally, when the time was right, the man started to detail everything that he had planned to do with the girl. First up came the proposal.
I wish I could marry you right now, because I would do it.
He clearly stated that if he had the chance, he would kidnap her and take her to his place in Nashville, where he would love her whether she liked it or not. And to assert his position further, he had the strangest way to address her. This man had some horrifying ideas. Finally, on his 37th birthday, Armstrong decided that it was time for him to drive down and meet Kayla, something he had been craving for over a month. He even brought Kayla a lovely present, a bracelet. After entering the house, Armstrong got comfortable on the massage chair and almost immediately started to woo the girl.
Like it, I dyed it by myself.
I think it's pretty.
Thank you.
It's very pretty.
But before things started getting touchy, Chris decided to storm right in. And in his possession were the chat logs that would soon reveal yet another shocking detail.
I'll tell you, for the last several days, you've been up to a lot. You're a pretty prolific chatter there.
You see, Armstrong's chat log was so long that it spanned over 408 pages, something which ardent fans today dearly refer to as the holy Lornography. And the extent of explicit content in those pages is beyond any normal person's imagination. Just as Chris was decoding the chat logs, Armstrong dropped a bomb that left Chris confused. Yeah, so Armstrong wanted us to believe that because he was taken for a ride in a previous relationship, it stemmed out of chatting online, and the only way he thought of getting back was to do the same thing with someone else. Tit for tat. How cool is that? Well, not so cool anymore when you're sentenced to 7 years in prison with additional probation and rehab classes, which he promptly failed to attend. Where's the weird part though? Well, here it comes. After his release, Armstrong curiously started a YouTube channel, which he believed would skyrocket since his short-lived fame on the show. Talk about being an opportunist. He actually thought that his time on television gained him fame. This clown from Boston was once again and arrested in 2019 for violating his parole and not having any sort of remorse towards his actions, even after spending a whopping 5 years in prison. Guess some people never learn. But this next man might be the most dangerous man to have ever been featured on the show. But guess what? He was also just as weird. How weird? This one will leave you in splits.
I have walked from Pomona.
The final man to have the honor of making it to this list is a man who had been charged with several cases spanning all the way from his childhood days. Pierre War's life itself was a roller coaster that kept going up and down. Although he did fall in love a couple of times, he couldn't really settle down with anyone. I mean, how could he? This dude's entire life has been in and out of jail for offenses that even included individuals. When the team landed Wary while scouting for the next weirdo online, they had no idea what was in store. Wary had started a conversation with a bait named Luke, who was set up by the Watchdog organization. At the time of the chats, the 48-year-old had started the conversation all the way from a public library under the email address I'mMichaelWiltz@yahoo.com. Wary approached this account with absolutely no fear. Unlike other men on the show, Wary directly got into what he wanted even before trying to get to know the boy. This was concerning since this meant that Wary was either very impatient or he just didn't care. After a quick background check, the crew realized that they had to be extra careful since this man was no joke. Considering his history, this man was bound to be careful, and that's exactly what you can see in this next clip. Probably that's the cue to show up in his line of work, but it didn't work with the person he was here to meet. Since the team was prepared for his arrival, an actor posing to be Luke called out to Wary from behind a wall inside the house. But here's the big twist. The actor was a woman who could closely mimic a younger person's voice. Quite impressive. But was it enough to get Wary inside the house? It looks like it worked. Now take some time to get a good look at this guy, y'all. This guy looked like he was ready for a hike. What was he hiking though? Mount Everest? The man looked absolutely weary. But is that going to deter him from his goal of approaching Luke?
Yeah.
Hey, just got fixed right now.
Wary was in a hurry. If not for Chris's intervention, he would have scooped up poor little Luke in no time. Let's pitch in a little background here. During his chats, Wary told Luke that he was a promotional photographer and was in town to film a hot movie. This is where things get weird. Wary claimed that he needed Luke's help in order to complete his work and even offered to feature him in his works. But there was a catch. Luke would have to succumb to a casting couch moment, not just with Wary, but also a few other men. When Chris started to question him, Wary was as calm as still water. And when he finally opened his mouth, he turned the entire story upside down.
And who were you looking for? John Peterson. John?
As the conversation pursued on, Wary started to get more and more convinced with his own story. One weird answer followed another, as Chris continued to grill the puffy old man.
So you thought you were going to come to a job interview at this home at 11:28 at night?
I was going to leave a note.
So here we have a man who wants Chris to believe that he came all the way, halfway by bus and the other half walking, just to meet a random guy he didn't even know, only because somebody else gave him his number, whose name he also doesn't know. And for what was he doing all this? Just to leave a small little note. If only people were as dedicated as this in real life. But no matter what, Wary did not budge from his extravagant lie. And so Chris decided to cut the crap and reveal his true identity. And this is where we usually see some sort of reaction from the weirdos. But Wary was some other creature. His stare was haunting. Once Wary left the house, he was rounded up by the cops, and once again, the story got twisted. The cop was bewildered, and his reaction is pretty legit. This weirdo had narrated a detailed and very intricate story, and after all that, who the hell is Scott now? This next predator came along with his escape plan. While predators usually bring drinks or chocolates, this one brought something else. Correction. Someone else, actually.
Here comes another computer engineer.
Double dates are usually fun, but when it involves underage kids, it's downright disgusting. Well, that pretty much sums up this next predator's story.
I will kiss you from top to bottom. I will treat you nicely. How do you like to be loved?
25-year-old Polkit Matur chatted up with a decoy named Kiera. Matur, a computer engineer by profession, went by the screen name Pookie007 US, and from what I understand, this wasn't his first interaction with an underage teen. Kiera made it a point to bring up her age often during the conversation, but Matur didn't seem to be bothered by the fact that the girl was just 13 years old. All he wanted was Once Mature zeroed in on a date, he then went on to ask Kiera a very strange question. Mature wanted to know if the 13-year-old had a friend who would be interested to spend the night with them. Oh no, he wasn't looking for he was looking for a partner for his friend. The only problem being they were dealing with kids.
And what'd you guys bring?
A lot of sandwiches.
Oh, yes, I love sandwiches.
When the decoy asked them to get into the hot tub, both the men were beaming with excitement, but soon it would all be washed away. Just as the decoy left to change, Chris Hansen popped up from nowhere, and this is what he asked.
Lunch? What are you guys doing?
I think just ready to have some food and all.
Some food.
Both the men were in absolute shock, but neither of them wanted to show their distress. Mature then explained that he was in the US on business matters and that he wasn't a permanent resident of the country. Probably he thought being a foreigner meant he would be freed, but sadly for him, it proved to be more trouble. What was he expecting? Like as if we don't have enough predators out here that we would encourage others to roam free. When Kanish kept trying to prove his innocence, Hansen pulled out the chat logs. At that very moment, Mature realized that they were in deep. He tries to rubbish the chat logs by saying this.
No, it's right here.
Yeah, I might have chatted, but that was only for, like, that's a chatting, that's nothing intentional.
But when the heat started to rise, Kanish threw his friendship out of the window and his friend under the bus. He blamed the entire thing on Mature and said that he was only here to help him around the town. But was he as innocent as he claimed to be? Of course not. Kanish was himself in touch with another 13-year-old decoy. When the decoy asked him what sort of things guys do with girls, he gave a very sly answer. It was so smart that he answered her question and yet did not say anything sleazy. Well, this is what he said.
Come on, Amanda, you don't know that? And then says, for the same reason Pulkit is meeting Kira.
After Hansen reveals himself, both the men start to bricks. Right off the bat, they started apologizing, but it only fell on deaf ears. Both the men were escorted to the police headquarters for further interrogation. Was convicted of his felonies. He managed to avert the authorities by skipping his court date. He probably fled the country before any more restrictions were put into place. Kanish, on the other hand, managed to get away since his chats did not have substantial evidence against him. Now, let me tell you what is scary about this encounter. It's not just the fact that two predators got away, it's even more worrisome that they knew how to get away. But this next predator made the lamest excuse when asked why he came to meet the underage teen.
What did you think it was?
Truly a setup.
And why would somebody try to do a setup?
To catch people that shouldn't be talking to teenagers.
53-year-old Stanley Kendall was a high school math teacher. Just think about all the kids he was in contact with. Anything could have happened to anyone. But online, Stanley went by the screen name StainMac1. To exercise his hair-raising fantasies, Stanley struck up a conversation with a 13-year-old boy. Barely 2 minutes into that chat, Kendall asked the boy whether he would like to play with him. To get more clarity, the decoy asked him what he meant by it. And this is when Kendall continues to explicitly explain what he intended to do as play. In his own words, he said, "I love to play and play with and lick." Coming from a man of his age and reputation, this is absolutely shocking. When the decoy tried to act innocent, Kendall offered to teach him how to do things. And this time, it wasn't about math. He first sent a photo of his and this is how the rest of the conversation went like.
Do you want to play with it?
Well, only if you're nice to me, and don't make fun of me if I don't do something right.
Of course, I can teach you by doing it to you.
The only thing Kendall wanted in return was the reassurance that the cops wouldn't be involved. This is quite a sly ploy, since Kendall was fully aware of what he was doing. However, he had already given the cops enough evidence to book him under various felonies. But that's not what happened. Cut to when Kendall entered the Sting house. The decoy offered him a drink, but Kendall refused to take it. The decoy then asked him to elaborate on what they were about to do. But even before he could finish replying, Hansen walks right in saying,
"A lesson planned for tonight."
I'm sorry.
Sorry for what?
I thought this was a joke.
You thought what was a joke?
He thought this was a what? A joke? Okay. Are you kidding me? Kendall tries desperately to prove his innocence and even reveals that he is a 6th grade math teacher at a school nearby. But Hansen immediately takes this point and turns it around at Kendall.
They have a conversation like this and come visit a 13-year-old boy. What have you been doing with students?
Kendall, however, was offended that Hansen was trying to sling mud at his profession, to which he had dedicated 23 long years. Well, the job which he was gloating about so much was now in jeopardy, and so he tried his best to get off the hook and started to apologize repeatedly. However, he was thrown behind bars. Kendall's bail was set at $50,000, and he was also placed on administrative leave indefinitely. He went on to serve his time in jail for a few months, but something happened. How did this old man escape? Did someone help him break out? Not literally, but that's exactly what happened. I'm not entirely sure if Kendall got back to teaching, but it's bad enough that he was let out into the streets again. But this next predator does something crazy when he sees the camera crew.
I gotta take off. Sir, I need to talk to you for a minute.
Maurice Wolin had a noble job, but an equally disgusting mind. The cancer research doctor, despite all of his qualifications, found pleasure in exploiting the innocence of underage teens. The doctor pulled up to the decoy's house, who claimed to be 13 years old. He tries to initiate a conversation between them as he pours himself a drink. We all know what this is leading up to, but how did he get here in the first place? Going by the name of Tall Dreamy Doc, Wolin had started a conversation with the decoy by introducing himself to be 29 years old. In truth, he was all of 48. Wolin made nasty comments about how he wanted to caress the decoy's and how he was aroused. He even asked the decoy to herself while thinking about him. Well, Wolin knew what he was doing, since he even mentioned that if he were to get caught, it would be a lot of trouble for him, which makes me wonder, why then take the risk at all? Meanwhile, let's go back to when Wolin poured himself a drink. I'm not sure if he had shaky hands or was just being clumsy, but he ended up spilling all over the counter. In order to clear the mess up, he goes in search of a towel, and that is when this happened.
I gotta take off. Sir.
After spotting Chris Hansen and the entire camera crew, Wolin bolts towards the exit, but how far can he really get?
On the ground. I wasn't gonna do it. Get on the ground. Get on the ground.
Before we get to that, since you got this far in my video, I'm sure as you're enjoying it. So to make sure you stay updated with all the amazing content that I have for you, make sure to drop a like and subscribe to my channel. Let's see what happens with the demented doctor. He spent 2 months in jail and got a lifetime registration as a registered offender. Doesn't seem like the most effective punishment after what he had done. His license to practice medicine was revoked after his conviction, but Wolin doesn't end it there just yet. He hires an attorney to fight his case for over 2 years before pleading no contest. This man did not deserve to get off that easily, but somehow that's what happened. Despite all the heinous acts they committed, these predators escaped justice. The show went to great lengths to capture these perverts, but one single lawsuit against the show screwed everything up for them. You think perverted justice should make a comeback? Well, I sure do. But would Chris Hansen agree to host the show? Now that's something we've got to find out. Meanwhile, keep your eyes and ears open, for perverts like these are often right under your nose. With that, I'm heading off. Thanks for watching, guys.